It wasn't the champagne or the music, it was the way he leaned in and whispered in my ear. So close I felt the heat of his breath on my neck. Even though I was wearing my husband's name on my finger. I shouldn't have let him. I shouldn't have liked it. But I did. It started like any other Saturday evening in our curated life. The kind of party that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Ambient lighting, laughter that floated above jazz, and crystal glasses that chimed like secrets in the air. My husband, Drew, loved to host. He was in his element that night, charming, generous, orbiting the room like he owned it. Because in a way he did. I stood near the window, wrapped in silk the color of dusk, sipping something expensive and cold. I was playing my role. Elegant, supportive, the woman behind the man. I smiled when I was supposed to. I nodded at business partners' jokes I didn't find funny. But inside I was somewhere else entirely. Until I felt him behind me. He didn't touch me. Not at first. Just the ghost of a presence, close enough to disturb the air. I felt it before I heard his voice. You always wear that color when you're trying not to be noticed. My breath hitched. It was Evan. Drew's friend. The architect with a crooked smile and the voice like a secret unraveling in the dark. We had met a year ago. Harmless small talk at dinners, polite glances across rooms. But there had always been something electric beneath the surface, something we never acknowledged. Until tonight. I turned my head slightly, not enough for anyone to notice, but just enough for him to see the corner of my smile. You think I'm trying not to be noticed? He moved closer. His lips were inches from my ear. His voice lower now. No. I think you want to be seen. But not by him. My heart was no longer beating in rhythm. It stumbled, caught in its own chaos. I should have stepped away. I should have found my husband, anchored myself to the life I chose. But I didn't. I stayed. The room blurred around us. The sound faded. All I could feel was his breath against my skin. The heat between us rising in degrees that felt dangerously delicious. I tilted my head, ever so slightly, and felt a single lock of his hair brush my cheek. You shouldn't say things like that, I whispered. He smiled, the kind of smile you feel in your spine. Then why are you still here? And that's when I realized I wasn't just standing still. I was waiting. Waiting for something I hadn't let myself want. Waiting to hear him whisper again. I don't remember what song was playing. All I know is that I couldn't move. Not really. I was still standing in the middle of our living room, surrounded by guests and laughter and wine. Yet all I could feel was him. Evan. 3 inches behind me. Maybe less. He hadn't touched me. Not once. But his presence pressed against my skin like a thought I couldn't shake. I tried to steady my breath. Tried to remember I was wearing Drew's favorite dress. Tried to remember I was the wife of the man who was now standing across the room, throwing his head back in laughter with 2 of his colleagues from work. But Evan. He was close. Still. And I could feel the heat from his body like it was wrapping itself around my back, whispering against the silk clinging to my waist. My glass trembled slightly in my hand. You're shaking, Evan murmured, just low enough so no one else could hear. I'm fine, I lied. You sure? He asked, and I swear I could hear the grin behind his words. Because I don't think I've ever seen you lose your cool. He was right. I was always composed. Always immaculate, polite, poised. The wife people envied. But right then all I could think about was how easily his voice melted my edges. You're enjoying this, I said softly. His answer came after a beat. You have no idea. I turned slightly. Just enough to catch a glimpse of him from the corner of my eye. He looked so calm, so casual, like this was nothing to him. Like he wasn't breaking rules we had both never agreed to follow. My voice was barely a whisper. Why now? He leaned in, not touching but closer. Because tonight, you didn't look like you wanted to be safe. I felt something stir deep in my chest. That dangerous curiosity. That ache we pretend we've outgrown. And I hated that he saw it. Someone called my name. I blinked. It was Margot, Drew's assistant, waving me over to introduce me to her boyfriend. I nodded, forcing a smile, excusing myself with a grace I didn't feel. I could feel Evan watching me as I walked away. I didn't need to turn around, I felt him. Still right there. Inside my skin. But I couldn't focus on Margot or her boyfriend. I couldn't focus on anything but the fact that Evan had gotten inside my head with nothing more than a whisper. And I knew without question this was no longer harmless. This was a storm building behind closed doors. I made it through the conversation with Margot like I was walking on a tightrope in stilettos, smiling, nodding, pretending I wasn't burning alive beneath my skin. Her boyfriend shook my hand, said something about real estate, and I responded with words I couldn't remember. "If you paid me," because I felt him again. Evan. This time he touched me. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't even overt. It was a single hand, placed delicately on the small of my back as he passed behind me, like he was just moving through the crowd like any other guest. But the weight of it, God. My breath caught like it had something to hide. My pulse kicked in my neck. He didn't stop walking. Didn't even look at me. Just kept moving, blending into the party as if nothing had happened. But I stood there, frozen in my heels, trying to remember how to exist like a normal person. That touch, it lingered. Like an echo inside my spine. Drew appeared beside me moments later, laughing, placing a kiss on my cheek. "You okay, babe? You look flushed." "I'm fine," I said too quickly. "Just warm." He offered to get me some water. I nodded, grateful for the space. Because I was unraveling thread by thread. I scanned the room, searching for Evan, half hoping he'd disappeared, half praying he hadn't. And then I saw him. In the hallway. Leaning against the doorframe of Drew's office, glass in hand, looking like temptation had taken human form. He tilted his head just slightly when he caught me looking. Nothing big. Just a signal. A suggestion. My feet moved before my conscience could catch up. I slipped through the crowd like a woman sleepwalking, pretending I was just looking for a moment of quiet, just catching my breath. The hallway lights were dimmer. Quieter. The walls felt closer. And when I stepped into the doorway, he didn't say a word. He just looked at me. And I swear that look peeled me open. "Was that for them?" I asked. "The touch." His voice was low. "No. That was for you." I felt my back touch the doorframe behind me. I didn't remember leaning. My knees weren't entirely reliable. "This is dangerous," I whispered. He took one step closer. "That's what makes it real." I should have stopped it. I should have walked away. But instead, I let my eyes fall shut as he leaned in, close enough for his breath to kiss my neck again, close enough for his words to warm the base of my throat. "I can stop," he said, voice like smoke. "Then why don't you?" I breathed. His pause was everything. "Because," he said finally, "you're not asking me to." And I wasn't. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. But the space between us was thread-thin, taut with something neither of us dared name. The kind of space that wasn't empty, it was full. Of breath. Of heat. Of permission neither of us spoke out loud. And then I heard footsteps. Voices. Someone was heading down the hall. In a panic, I stepped further into the office. His hand caught my wrist before I could pass him. Gently. Firmly. Not to stop me but to follow. He closed the door behind us. But not all the way. It stayed cracked. A sliver of light from the hallway poured in like a secret, enough to keep us tethered to the danger we were dancing with. I stood in the middle of Drew's office, surrounded by the smell of mahogany, leather-bound books, and my husband's cologne faintly lingering in the air. This was his space. His world. And here I was with Evan. With a man who was looking at me like I was the answer to a question he wasn't supposed to ask. He moved closer. Not touching, just orbiting. That maddening patience. That knowing smile. "You don't look scared," he said. "I am," I whispered. "Of me?" His eyes flicked to my mouth, then back up again. "Of myself." He nodded like he understood more than I wanted him to. I turned toward the bookshelves, tracing my fingers along the spines to steady myself. I could feel him behind me again. That now familiar energy in the air. The tension between wanting and waiting. When I paused, he stepped closer. His chest brushing the silk of my dress, just enough to make my breath catch. His hand moved to my hip, light as a suggestion. And my entire body responded like it had been aching for that exact contact. "You've thought about this," he said quietly. I nodded, unable to lie. "So have I." His hand slid up my side, stopping just beneath my ribs, still careful. Still giving me space to say no. But I didn't. As I didn't want space. I wanted to feel, to fall, to burn. And then, his lips hovered just above my shoulder. Not kissing, not touching, just letting me know they were there. His breath poured over my skin like something sacred. My head tilted involuntarily, offering him more. I shouldn't be here, I said. But you are, he replied. And so am I. And the door, still cracked open, suddenly felt more intimate than any locked room. Because someone could walk by. Someone could hear. Someone could know. But instead of pulling away, I felt myself drifting closer. Drawn to the one person who had done nothing more than listen to the part of me I'd spent years trying to silence. We didn't speak for what felt like forever. And yet it said everything. The silence was thick, humming with everything we weren't saying. The kind of silence that touches you, that teases you. His hand still rested on my waist, not demanding, not pulling, just waiting. Like he knew I'd lean back into him when I was ready. And I almost did. But the crack in the door, it whispered restraint. My heart pounded loud enough I was sure he could hear it. I stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on a framed photo of Drew and me on his desk. Our wedding in Italy. Sunlight. Smiles. A moment frozen in innocence. I hated that Evan was here with me in this space. I hated it even more that it felt, right? You think about him when you're with me? Evan murmured. His question caught me off guard. I didn't answer. Because the truth was I didn't know. In this moment Drew wasn't real. He was just an idea I was supposed to protect. But Evan was here. His breath was here. His hand. His heat. I think about you, I said. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been waiting to hear that longer than he was willing to admit. And then his fingers began to move, not hurried, not greedy, just a slow drag along the fabric of my dress, tracing the lines of my body like a memory he was etching into his palm. I turned to face him. Our eyes locked. That was the moment. The one I would replay in every quiet second that followed. Because his gaze, it undressed me. Not my clothes. Me. Every hesitation, every lie I'd told myself about being satisfied, content, fulfilled. It all fell away under the weight of that look. I shouldn't want this, I whispered. But you do, he said, stepping even closer. And that's the most honest thing you've said all night. I let out a shaky breath. My hand rose, almost without permission, and found the edge of his jacket. My fingers curled into the fabric like they needed something to hold, or I'd float away. He leaned in, forehead brushing mine, so close I could feel his restraint tremble. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I couldn't. I didn't. And in that pause, that dangerous, intoxicating pause, I realized something that terrified me more than anything. I didn't want to be saved. Not from him. Not from this. It was the sound of footsteps again that broke the spell. Louder this time. Closer. I flinched. Evan stepped back just enough to let a breath of air cool between us. But his eyes never left mine. That hungry stillness clung to us, even as the moment cracked. Then came the voice. Hey, has anyone seen? It was Brandon, one of Drew's coworkers. Young, too confident, and far too curious. I jolted, turning toward the desk, pretending to fumble with a stack of cocktail napkins I'd spotted in a silver tray. Evan, to his credit, was calm, almost casual, as he opened the door wider and leaned against the frame like he'd simply stepped inside to take a break. Brandon appeared seconds later. There you guys are, he said with a smirk, eyeing the two of us far too knowingly. Thought maybe you got lost. I laughed too loud. Just needed some quiet for a second. The music's getting intense out there. Evan added smoothly, was showing her Drew's design sketches. Didn't realize we were drawing a crowd. Brandon raised an eyebrow but let it slide. Well, hurry up. They're about to bring out that ridiculous cake. You don't want to miss Drew trying to blow out sparklers again. He was gone as quickly as he came. The second the door clicked shut, I pressed my hands to my face. My whole body was buzzing, not just from the close call but from something deeper. Something I couldn't name without unraveling entirely. Evan stepped toward me, voice low and unshaken. We need to stop. I nodded, but neither of us moved. We can't do this again, I said. Then why does it feel like we already have? His words curled around me, soft and brutal. Like we've been doing this every time we've looked at each other. I looked at him and it was true. Every dinner. Every accidental brush of hands when passing the wine. Every shared smile that lingered too long. We'd been playing with fire in plain sight. Only now we were close enough to feel the burn. I used to think I was content, I said quietly. That I had everything I wanted. And now, I searched his face. Now I feel alive. And I don't know if that's freedom or destruction. His hand moved slowly, this time not toward me but to the door. He opened it fully. I won't take this further unless you choose it, he said. But you should know. I'm not going to pretend this isn't real. I walked past him, my shoulder grazing his as I left. I didn't look back. But I didn't have to, because I could still feel him. Like a match I hadn't struck, but knew would catch flame the second I let it. The party should have pulled me back to reality. The lights were still low, the air rich with music and laughter, glasses clinking like nothing had shifted. But everything had. I walked among the guests like a ghost wearing silk, smiling, nodding, answering questions I didn't hear. All while the echo of his breath, his words, that touch hummed beneath my skin like an aftershock. And then Drew found me. He slipped his arm around my waist, warm and familiar. The man I loved, or the man I had loved. He pressed a kiss to my temple and I leaned into it. I did, because I wasn't lying when I said I'd built a life I was proud of. But something had fractured now, and I didn't know how to seal it without pretending it never happened. Come on, Drew said. They want to do a toast. I followed him to the center of the room, where someone raised a glass and made a joke about success, about long nights and loyalty and partnerships that lasted a lifetime. Everyone laughed. Everyone drank. I watched Evan from across the room. He didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Just raised his glass slowly and sipped. His eyes never left mine. And I knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. Later, much later, after the guests had dwindled, the music faded, and Drew collapsed into bed, drowsy from champagne. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, still in my dress, staring out the window into the dark. That's when I heard it. A knock. Not at the door. At the back gate. Our side entrance. The one we never used. I moved on instinct. Quiet. Careful. When I stepped outside, the air was cooler. The night wrapped in a hush that felt stolen. He was there. Evan. Standing just beyond the threshold. Half in shadow, hands in his pockets. That same impossible calm beneath the chaos I felt radiating from him. I shouldn't have come, he said softly. Then why are you here? His eyes found mine in the dark. Because I can't stop thinking about you. And I think you can't either. The silence between us was an answer. I stepped out. He didn't move. Neither did I. I can't give you more, I said, my voice breaking on the words. I'm not asking for more, he replied. I'm asking for this. I shook my head, but my feet kept moving. Until we were inches apart. Until the heat between us was undeniable. His hand rose slowly, trembling slightly for the first time, and brushed my hair back behind my ear. And then he whispered. I dreamt about this. Exactly like this. My lips parted. I wasn't breathing normally. My body was drawn to him like gravity had shifted. I'll go, he said, his voice ragged. If you ask me to. But I didn't. I stepped forward. He caught my waist with both hands, pulled me in with a desperate reverence that made the stars feel too close. Our foreheads met. Our mouths didn't. But everything else did. And when I finally stepped back, barely, I saw it on his face. We'd crossed the line. And we wouldn't be able to step back again. The next morning I woke before the sun. The sheets still smelled like Drew. His arm lay heavy across my waist, his breath soft and slow with sleep. I stared at the ceiling and felt everything. Guilt, want, regret, confusion. Tangled inside me like threads knotted too tight to pull free. I hadn't kissed Evan. But it didn't matter. Because something inside me had already unraveled. And it wouldn't go back the same. I slipped out of bed quietly, feet brushing the cold floor. I didn't look in the mirror as I passed it. I wasn't ready to face whatever expression might be waiting there. In the kitchen, I poured coffee I didn't drink. The silence of morning wrapped around me like a confession I couldn't make. I touched the place on my waist where Evan's hands had been. My skin still hummed there like it remembered before I did. There was a message on my phone. Just one. From him. I won't come again. Unless you ask me to. But if this meant something to you, you don't have to say it. I already know. I stared at the words like they were a secret I'd been keeping from myself. And I cried. Quietly. Not out of shame or even sorrow. But because I knew what this was. Not a mistake. Not even an affair. It was a mirror. And what I saw in it terrified me. I had spent years being the right woman. Loyal. Beautiful. Safe. But the part of me that stood in that office, back arched, breath trembling, body pulled toward heat and hunger and reckless want, that part was real too. And I couldn't pretend she didn't exist anymore. Later, when Drew woke and kissed my neck, I smiled and made breakfast. I laughed when he teased me. I wore the robe he loved and played the role I'd written for myself. But I carried something under my skin now. A whisper I couldn't unhear. A hand I could still feel. A boundary I could never uncross. And somewhere out there was a man who had touched a part of me that had been asleep for years and woken it without ever undressing me. If you've ever felt something like this, like a moment that shook your whole foundation, tell me in the comments. Do you think emotional cheating is just as real as physical? Would you have walked away? Subscribe for more stories like this. Confessions. Temptations. Moments that blur the line. This isn't just a story. It's a confession. And maybe it's yours too.